Most men believe relationships end because of something big, betrayal, a huge fight, or an obvious mistake. But the truth is much more uncomfortable. The biggest problems usually start small. Quiet behaviors, subtle changes, little moments that don't seem important until they are. And that's exactly why so many men miss the warning signs women show right in front of them. The reality is simple. When certain warning signs women show start repeating, they're not coincidences, they're patterns. Patterns that can slowly drain your respect, your energy, and your peace of mind. In this video, we're going to explore the warning signs women show that many men ignore until it's too late, and why sometimes the smartest move is to leave fast. And before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This channel is dedicated to helping men understand psychology, relationships, and self-respect on a deeper level. We're currently working toward our goal of 1,000 subscribers, so if you enjoy this kind of content, hit subscribe and be part of the mission. Topic 1. The subtle disrespect that looks like jokes many men don't notice when disrespect begins. Because most of the time it shows up disguised as humor. Everything seems light, almost harmless. A joke here, a sarcastic comment there. At first he laughs along. After all, nobody wants to look overly sensitive, right? But a more attentive observer starts noticing something interesting. Those jokes tend to have the same target, him. And when small doses of disrespect start repeating, it stops being humor and becomes a silent warning sign inside the relationship. Experienced mentors often say something simple. Respect rarely disappears all at once. It fades little by little. In a common situation. She says something in front of friends like, "Well, he tries to be smart sometimes." Everyone laughs. He laughs too, a little awkwardly. Later, she makes another joke about his job, or something he worked years to build. Comments like these seem harmless at first, but over time they create a dangerous dynamic. This kind of female behavior doesn't explode suddenly. It shows up in small micro-moments that most men overlook. Here's the detail almost nobody talks about. Healthy jokes make both people laugh. But when only one person constantly becomes the punchline, something isn't right. Emotionally strong men learn to watch patterns, not just isolated moments. If her humor regularly puts you down, questions your competence, or quietly tests your dignity, that's one of the earliest red flags of a toxic relationship forming, and interestingly enough, this behavior almost never shows up alone. In fact, it's usually followed by something even more subtle, something many men mistake for genuine affection. But that hides a very different intention. Topic 2. She only shows affection when she needs something. There's a type of relationship dynamic that confuses many men, especially in the beginning. Everything feels great, till he starts noticing a strange pattern, where affection appears at very specific moments. Sweet messages, compliments, physical closeness. It suddenly shows up out of nowhere. But shortly after, a request follows. It might be something small, like help with a task, or something bigger like attention, favors, or emotional validation. When a man pays attention to this kind of female behavior, he starts realizing it could be another warning sign inside the relationship. A wiser mentor would say, real affection is consistent. It shows up on good days and on ordinary days too. But when affection works like a switch, turned on only when there's something to gain, something isn't balanced. Imagine a simple scenario. For days she seems distant, cold, or uninterested. Then suddenly she texts things like, "Hey, you're amazing," or "I really missed you today." Soon after, she casually mentions she needs help with something. For many men, this pattern goes unnoticed at first. But over time it can point to emotional manipulation that often appears in toxic relationships. Men who develop emotional awareness learn to observe not just what someone says, but when they say it. If affection tends to appear right before a request, it's worth paying attention. That doesn't mean reacting with anger or confrontation. It means watching the pattern over time. Because most of the time, when this behavior shows up, it doesn't come alone. In fact, it usually walks side by side with another intriguing behavior. Something many women do almost unconsciously to measure the kind of man standing in front of them. Topic 3. She constantly tests your boundaries. There's something many men discover only after spending time in a relationship. Some people test boundaries constantly. At first, those tests seem small, almost invisible. A slightly unreasonable request here, a mildly uncomfortable situation there. nothing big enough to cause a serious argument. And that's exactly how it begins. This type of female behavior often works like a silent radar, trying to figure out how far he's willing to bend. For a perceptive man, this can already be another important warning sign. Picture a simple situation. She asks for something that clearly crosses his time or values, canceling an important commitment, ignoring something he believes is wrong, or accepting behavior that makes him uncomfortable. If he agrees, another test appears soon after, slightly bigger, then another one. It's like slowly pushing a door to see how far it will open. Many men miss this pattern because they want to keep peace in the relationship. But experienced mentors know that clear boundaries are one of the foundations of respect in any healthy dynamic. Now here's where it gets interesting. When a man calmly holds his boundaries, reactions start showing up quickly. Some women respect it and even admire him more. Others respond with irritation, guilt, or emotional pressure. And that's when the real nature of the dynamic starts revealing itself. Because when boundary tests become frequent, something else is usually hiding right behind them. Something that can turn small situations into conflicts much bigger than they should be. Topic 4. She creates drama out of nothing. Many men enter a relationship expecting calm, partnership, and emotional stability. But over time, something strange starts happening. Small situations, truly small things, suddenly turn into long, exhausting arguments. Being a few minutes late, replying to a message later than usual, or making a neutral comment can become the center of a huge conflict. At first, he assumes it was just a bad day. But when the pattern repeats, another warning sign begins to appear. Experienced observers notice that certain types of female behavior feed on drama, almost like emotional fuel. Instead of resolving issues calmly, situations grow bigger, more complicated, and emotionally intense. Picture a common scene. Ashley says he'd rather stay home that night. Suddenly she interprets it as rejection, lack of interest, or proof he doesn't care enough. What could have been a simple conversation turns into a discussion about feelings, intentions, and past events. Many men, this creates the constant feeling of walking on eggshells. Over time, he starts living in a state of alert. He thinks twice before speaking, avoids certain topics, and tries predicting reactions to prevent new conflicts. And this is one of the quietest effects of a toxic relationship: daily emotional exhaustion. When drama becomes routine, the relationship stops being a place of peace and becomes a source of tension. And interestingly enough, when this dynamic appears, another revealing behavior is usually hiding right beside it. Topic 5. She never takes responsibility for anything. There's a pattern experienced men learn to recognize quickly inside relationships. Whenever something goes wrong, certain people always find a way to blame something else. At first, he hears stories about terrible exes, toxic friends, or jobs that never appreciated her. Everything sounds reasonable at the beginning. After all, everyone goes through difficult experiences. But over time, one detail stands out. In every story, she's always the perfect victim, and that can be another quiet warning sign. A wise mentor often says emotional maturity shows up when someone can admit their role in a problem. Mature people say things like, "Maybe I reacted badly there, or I could have handled that differently." But when that never happens, something feels off. Imagine a typical situation. An argument appears in the relationship. He tries talking calmly to understand what happened. Yet the answer is always the same. It's his fault, the circumstances, or anything except her. This kind of female behavior creates a dynamic where he ends up carrying the emotional weight of the relationship. Over time, something even more dangerous happens. The man begins doubting his own perception. He wonders if he really did something wrong, even when he knows he didn't. And that's exactly how many toxic relationships develop, slowly and almost invisibly. When someone never takes responsibility, problems are never truly resolved. They simply repeat in new forms. And interestingly, when this pattern appears frequently, another subtle shift often follows. One that begins affecting not only the relationship, but his entire world. Topic 6. She slowly isolates you from friends and family. At the beginning of many relationships, everything feels natural. She wants to spend more time together, prefers doing things as a couple, and seems excited about building something closer. Nothing about that feels strange. It even seems romantic. But over time, some men start noticing a subtle change. Suddenly, she doesn't like certain friends. She makes comments about his family. She questions why he needs to spend time with other people. This type of female behavior rarely starts aggressively. It appears slowly, almost invisibly. And that's exactly why it can be a dangerous warning sign. Imagine a simple scenario. He mentions he's meeting friends on the weekend. She replies with something like, "So, you'd rather spend time with them than with me." Another time, she claims his family doesn't like her, even without real evidence. Gradually, he starts avoiding those gatherings just to prevent tension. Without realizing it, he reduces contact with people who are always part of his life. Experienced mentors notice that this kind of emotional isolation creates dependency inside the relationship, something very common in toxic dynamics. Over time, the psychological effect becomes clear. The relationship starts feeling like the center of his entire life. Her opinions carry more weight than anyone else's, and at that point, many men notice something unsettling. The more isolated he becomes, the harder it is to see the situation clearly. Because when someone controls the social environment around you, they gain enormous influence over how you think and react. And when that dynamic begins appearing, another revealing signal usually isn't far behind. Topic 7. Her words and actions never match. There's a simple principle. Attentive men eventually learn. In a relationship, actions speak louder than words. At first, everything sounds perfect. She says she cares, that she values the relationship, that she wants something serious. Her words are comforting and inspiring. But as time goes on, something starts feeling off. Her actions tell a completely different story. And when that gap repeats consistently, it becomes another important warning sign within certain patterns of female behavior. Imagine a common example. She says honesty and respect are important, yet she lies about small things or hides simple information. Or she says she wants to build something stable while continuing behaviors that create insecurity in the relationship. Experienced mentors often point out that consistency is one of the pillars of trust. When someone says one thing but does another, the mind naturally enters a state of alert, not because the man is paranoid, but because the brain detects inconsistent patterns as potential risks. Over time, this contradiction creates a psychological conflict. The man clings to her words because they sound reassuring, while ignoring the evidence in her actions. This internal tension is why many men stay in toxic relationships far longer than they should. He keeps believing in the version of the relationship she describes, instead of the one he's actually experiencing. And when words and actions remain disconnected long enough, another powerful behavior often shows up right beside it. Topic 8. She uses guilt to control you. There's a powerful emotional tool that sometimes appears in relationships, and many men only recognize it when it's already affecting them: guilt. At first, it sounds like emotional expression. She says she feels sad, disappointed, or hurt. And there's nothing wrong with feelings. Emotions are part of healthy relationships. But over time, he starts noticing something interesting. Those emotions appear exactly when he makes decisions that don't benefit her. When that pattern repeats, it becomes another warning sign. Picture a simple situation. He decides to hang out with friends after a long week of work. Suddenly, she says something like, "I guess you don't care about me that much." Or the classic line appears, "If you really loved me, you would stay." These sentences sound harmless on the surface, but experienced mentors know they carry enormous emotional pressure. Instead of discussing the situation directly and maturely, the conversation shifts now. He must prove his love. This dynamic appears frequently in toxic relationships where guilt becomes a tool of emotional manipulation. Over time, he begins adjusting his behavior to avoid those reactions. He cancels plans, changes decisions, and prioritizes her emotional comfort above everything else. Without realizing it, he slowly hands over control of his life. And that's one of the quietest consequences of this dynamic. Personal freedom begins disappearing little by little. And when guilt becomes a common tool in a relationship, another revealing signal often appears right after it. Topic 9. She respects other men more than you. There's a moment in some relationships when men start feeling something strange, something difficult to explain. He notices that respect flows easily when she interacts with other people, especially other men. She listens carefully, praises ideas, shows admiration. But when it comes to him, the tone changes. Sarcastic comments appear, his opinions get ignored, and decisions he makes rarely receive the same acknowledgement. On an attentive observer, This can be one of the most uncomfortable warning signs. Picture a common scenario. They're in a group of friends or coworkers. Another man shares a story or opinion, and she reacts with curiosity and respect. But when her partner says something similar, the reaction is different. An impatient look, a dismissive joke, or simple indifference. First, he tries to rationalize it. Maybe it was just that moment. But when the pattern repeats, something deeper begins to reveal itself. Experienced mentors often say respect inside a relationship rarely disappears overnight, slowly gets redirected somewhere else. Over time, this dynamic creates a difficult feeling to ignore. The man begins feeling like he must prove his value inside his own relationship, while other men receive recognition naturally. And this is one of the most exhausting effects of toxic relationships: the quiet erosion of self-esteem. When respect stops being natural between two people, the emotional foundation of the relationship begins weakening. And when that sign appears, there is usually one final indicator that reveals everything with undeniable clarity. Topic 10. You feel drained every time you're around her. There's one signal many men ignore for a long time, but it rarely lies. It doesn't appear in specific arguments or words. It appears in the feeling that remains after each interaction. At the beginning of a relationship, spending time together brings energy, excitement, and joy. But in certain situations, something slowly changes. Conversations that once felt natural begin feeling exhausting. Time together leaves a strange sense of emotional fatigue. When this happens often, it can be one of the clearest warning signs of a problematic dynamic. An experienced mentor might suggest a simple question: how do you feel after spending a few hours with this person? Not during the moment, but afterward. If the honest answer is exhaustion, tension, or mental confusion, something important deserves attention. Imagine a man who hangs out with friends and comes home relaxed, laughing, energized. When he spends an evening with his partner, he finishes the conversation feeling completely drained. This emotional fatigue is extremely common in toxic relationships where small conflicts and subtle manipulations accumulate over time. Over months, this type of relationship creates a deep psychological effect. The man begins losing enthusiasm, focus, and even confidence, not because he changed, but because the emotional environment around him changed. And here's the truth: many men only realize later. Healthy relationships tend to expand your energy, not shrink it. When someone's constant presence creates emotional weight instead of peace, it might be time to look back at all the red flags that appeared along the way and understand what they were trying to tell you from the very beginning. Conclusion: strong men are not the ones who tolerate everything. They are the ones who recognize when a relationship is building something healthy and when it's slowly becoming toxic. So take a moment and ask yourself, have you ever noticed any of these signs in your life? Have you ever ignored something that, looking back now, was clearly a warning? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes one man's story helps many others see something they hadn't noticed yet. And if you want to keep learning about psychology, relationships, and self-respect, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we explore behaviors many men only understand too late, and the sooner you recognize these patterns, the better prepared you'll be to build healthier relationships. So if this video gave you some clarity, subscribe now and join us on this journey of growth.